Did the Minnesota Lynx win the 2023 WNBA Draft? I've got Lynx Beat reporter Terry Horstman here to discuss what he made of how Minny did in the draft, but also what he gleaned from their press conference yesterday when they introduced their 5 new players. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast, it starts right now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hello and welcome and happy Friday. You are locked onto women's basketball. I'm Jackie Powell. I'm one of your Friday hosts. I cover the New York Liberty at the Next. I help with our social media strategy, and I've covered women's basketball nationally at other places as well. We want to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by everyone at the Next, a place where we cover women's basketball all the time, and we tell the stories that need to and deserve to be told every day. Also, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So the last time we were together, listener, I had Alex Simon and M. Adler on the program to talk about the future and WNBA super drafts and how we got there. It was an absolutely fascinating discussion that I am sure we'll reference many times as we move through the upcoming calendar year. But let's move back to the present and be in the right here and right now. And Terry and I are going to talk about a team who we both believe had a really intriguing night on Monday, and that's the Minnesota Lynx. So first, we're going to break down the draft picks or the draft selections they made. We're going to examine their fit. Then we're going to talk observations from yesterday's press conference where Terry was live there in person for, and he got a feeling of the vibe. And then we'll conclude with a discussion about how we look at this moment and this draft for the Lynx and in their history and what it means for their franchise. So Terry, hello, welcome. Sorry, that was a mouthful of an intro. We are so happy to have you here. I think where I want to start is really simple. Do you think that the Minnesota Lynx won the 2023 WNBA Draft?
First of all, Jackie, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. Very excited about it. I think they might have. I hesitate to say they absolutely won. I think there's a couple other teams that did pretty well. I think Indiana, by default, sort of feels pretty good about what they did. I think Seattle getting Jordan Horston with the 9th pick is definitely a winning case for this winning the draft discussion. But I don't know what the Lynx could have done to make Lynx fans feel better about the draft, save for trading for like 5 first-round picks for next year's draft or the year after, which obviously wasn't something that's in the cards. So I think they did very well, and I think we could there's a path to going through the season and looking back on this draft night and saying that they won pretty handily.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. To me, and I think you wrote exactly this in your latest piece on thenexthoops.com. We'll put that piece in the show notes. But it was this really interesting thing where they were able to say, okay, or they were able to accomplish, okay, we're going to get some people or building blocks for the now, and we're also going to get some building blocks for the future.
Mhm.
And whenever you're able to do that, I think whenever you're able to do both, I think that sort of means that you have a really good night. So, the next thing I want us to do is I want to do a little bit of a rapid fire here, and I want to get your knee jerk reaction to all of the picks. So,
Mhm.
I'm going to go pick by pick and just take me back to where you were when you were watching this draft. What
Mhm.
sort of your knee jerk reaction was, in a sentence or two to each of their picks. So,
Right.
let's start. Okay. The Minnesota Lynx select Diamond Miller with the number 2 overall draft pick.
I was in my living room at home watching, and well, I think everyone was pleased with Diamond Miller being formally announced as the pick. I think just about the whole WNBA world had Diamond penciled in. Cheryl had mentioned in the pre-draft media availability that was on Friday, and had said when asked about how open she was to a trade with the number 2 pick, kind of made it seem like it would take one heck of a phone call for her to be willing to part with that asset. So I think we had all kind of. I think I was 99% sure Diamond was the pick. So felt like chalk at that point, but it was still great to see her go up there and hold up the Lynx jersey and shake Kathy's hand and everything as formally a member of the Lynx.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. With the number 12 overall pick in the WNBA draft, the Minnesota Lynx select Maïa Hirsch.
I think my exact reaction to this was okay. I didn't have the same enthusiastic, amazing reaction as our own Hunter Cruse did, who I think is probably the biggest Maya Hirsch fan in the world. But I was very intrigued and was just like, okay, I see you, Cheryl. I think Maya will get into what this pick means a lot more. But I was like, all right, we're playing for now and for the future with this pick here. So I was very intrigued and was like, okay, I think that's a pretty good overview of what Cheryl wanted coming out of the first round. So definitely intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, earlier this week on this podcast, I was on with Howard, one and only Howard, and Isabel
Mhm.
Rodriguez. And we were sort of, we were there was adrenaline, we were in the
Mhm.
moment. And Howard said there were as many as 5 general managers that were very,
Yeah.
very interested in Maïa Hirsch. And so, there were GMs that were thinking, "Ooh, I could get her in the second round as a steal." But I mean, I'd say it's pretty clutch, and she's 19 years old.
Right. Yeah.
That's there's so much potential there, and so I thought it was a pretty brilliant pick.
Yeah.
We obviously are not Maïa Hirsch experts like Hunter Cruse, but if you would like to learn more about her, I'll also put Hunter and M's draft board, the version 2.0 in the show notes, because there's a very lengthy description of why Hunter believes that she will be very successful at the next round. Okay, here we go. With the number 16th overall pick in the 2023 WNBA draft, the Minnesota Lynx select Dorka Juhász.
I think Cheryl was probably as pleased with this pick as the first two. I know we kind of scoff at mock drafts and take them with the biggest grain of salt we possibly can, but Dorka was someone routinely mocked the Lynx at 12, and I think was I believe I haven't been told this, but I believe she was part of that discussion within the Lynx war room. So to get Dorka at 16, and I think Cheryl said in the pre-draft or post-draft availability that there was no way Dorka was falling another pick or two beyond that in her mind. So yeah, I think that's a tremendous value pick as well.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by Dorka Juhász. I mean, I watched her pretty closely last season during her first year at UConn, and I think what intrigues me the most about her is how many different things she can do. I think it's interesting because what talent evaluators look for is they either look for versatility or they look for one skill that they are lights out in. And I think Dorka more is the former. And so I'm going to be really interested to see how the Lynx staff looks to develop her. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, I'm very high on Dorka. Not everyone on our draft scouting team at the Next was. So I'll be really interested to see what happens here. Okay, moving on. With the number 24 overall pick, the Minnesota Lynx select Brea Beal.
I think this was the one where I may have gotten off of my couch a little bit, and I was hoping to see Brea come off the board at 16 because I didn't think she was gonna get out of the first round, and I know that ended up being a tough night for her and a long wait. But at 24, when Kathy was walking to the podium, I was like, it can't be anyone other than Brea Beal. And whenever you say that out loud, watching a draft in any sport, like it just never ends up being the pick. When it's just that obvious. But I think that's sort of I think I immediately wrote Beal of the draft, a very very clever rhyming title in my reaction piece. I think that was like one where I don't think the Lynx could have gotten the selection in fast enough. I don't if they're on the clock for more than a second, I think it had to have been for some TV thing. Or like ads making sure that the sponsorship got enough of their shine. But yeah, that was one where just you are like, Brea Beal's here in the 24th at the 24th. Are you serious? So that was the one. I think that was the most exciting moment of the night for Lynx fans.
Yeah, that was a really interesting moment because I think a lot of us were sort of looking at, because this was the, I guess, second in-person draft in the Kathy Engelbert era.
Yeah.
And a lot of us were sort of comparing to last year. We were thinking, okay, who's going to be the Lexi Hull of this year? And so that, I guess, was Abby Myers. And I think maybe Brea Beal is the Destiny Henderson of this year because Henny was sitting there for a while and Lynn Dunn was like, I was shocked that she was there. And it seems pretty clear that Cheryl was shocked that she was still there. I think, and we'll talk about this more in the later segments, but it seemed clear to me that Brea Beal is getting over, I guess, the disappointment of being the 24th overall pick. And that's really encouraging to see.
Right. She did not seem disappointed yesterday, so.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And we will talk about that more because I think that's really interesting. Okay, so the Lynx final pick in this draft was the number 28th overall pick, and the Minnesota Lynx selected Taylor Soule.
Another player our whole scouting department was pretty high on. I think going into the draft, I was probably expecting players with a great chance of making the training camp roster at the 2, the 12, and the 16 picks. So getting a real dynamite scorer like Taylor Soule, who just took her team to the Final Four at the 28th overall pick, it kind of feels like you're playing fantasy basketball with some of the picks a little bit. So I think Cheryl and Claire and the whole staff were elated to get a talent like Taylor at 28.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were in our Slack group, when we were trying to predict, we were like, okay, who's going to be the Lexi Hull of this year? And I think it was Mitchell Northam who said, you know what? It could be Taylor Soule. It really could be her. But again, you have someone who maybe was drafted a little bit low for her talent and potentially how her talent could translate over to the next level. So we're going to take just a quick break before we hop on to our second segment, which will be sort of going inside what that presser, that intro presser to all these folks was like yesterday. But first, I do want to talk about Nissan's Most Electric Player of the Week, and it is brought to you by the all-new electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. And this week's Player of the Week is new Minnesota Lynx rookie and number 2 overall draft pick, Diamond Miller. I mean, if you want to describe Diamond Miller's game, she's quite electric in transition, but also during this whole draft process and draft week, she showed us how stunning and elegant she is. I interviewed her on the red carpet, or whoops, the orange
carpet.
Yes, on Monday, and I was asking her about the outfit and what inspired it, and she kept saying that she wanted to be elegant and professional, but also stunning and very appealing. And so, even from interviews that Diamond Miller has given in the past week, she really delivers on duality. She's really fierce and really spunky, but she's beautiful and strong. I mean, everyone talks about Diamond Miller's pro-ready body, just really muscular. So Diamond is just like the perfect SUV crossover. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one electric vehicle, just like Diamond Miller. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the electric vehicle for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. All right, let's get back to our program here. And we wanted to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, join us tomorrow, and that's Saturday, when our scouting department in Hunter Cruse and M. Adler will probably be diving into the postmortem of the 2023 WNBA Draft. Okay, so let's talk about yesterday's presser. I want to start with, what did you learn from it?
Mhm. I think we learned a lot, and I think I want to go back a little bit more to last Friday when Cheryl she had a Zoom and met with some local media. It wasn't the same fanfare, but that was one of, and I think you and I talked on the Slack a little bit about this. But it seemed that for the first time, Cheryl's been able to talk publicly about the long view, and said, while maintaining, the goal is always to win championships, and we know that's always going to be the end goal for this team. But I think she's been able to approach this draft and this upcoming season a little bit more pragmatic than she's probably allowed herself to in the past. And I think that's exciting for the fan base. I think for the first time in probably since Cheryl got here, it's not a win a championship or bust this year type thing. I think the fan base is kind of energized to think about, like, oh, like this project might take a while, but they're interesting and they're exciting. And I think this might be the most fascinating the Lynx have ever been. And I think a lot of people feel that same way. And I think yesterday's press conference, just being there in person, it's sort of also towed the line of being like, this is professional, this is a thing we're doing, and these players are coming in with a lot of expectations, and we're going to demand excellence out of it. But it also kind of felt like a little bit of a celebration too. Like it was in the Target Center atrium, and there were fans, upstairs and looking down, and people walking by and being like, "What's this?" and that kind of thing. So it was kind of like, we're not gonna roll out an orange carpet, if you will, and start planning parade routes for later in 2023. But it did sort of seem like this is a corner we just turned in a new era, and we're excited about it. And the players echoed that excitement as well. There was a great media turnout, and I think the human interest angle, while the expectations maybe lower from a win-losses standpoint. I don't think the interest has declined at all. In fact, I think it's gone up, and everyone's like, okay, the incredible 5 players that have really defined this franchise since Simone got here in 2006 are all gone now. And what happens next? And I think that's a really exciting question for Lynx fans to be asking. And I just think yesterday was emblematic of that. And the players are all excited to be here. I think they all bring a very different skill set. And, Cheryl looks pretty fired up about it. And I think she knows it's a big challenge ahead, but one that I think she's a bit more outwardly excited about than I was expecting heading into this portion of the offseason.
That's huge. I missed the bit of the presser because there were some technical difficulties on Zoom. So I appreciate sort of hearing from you what Cheryl's energy was, because I think she sort of gave the opening remarks and I was sitting there, I was like, oh, what is Cheryl saying? What is her energy? Like it was a big mystery. But I'm curious also about what maybe individual moments really stood out to you.
I think as Cheryl was introducing the players one at a time, a coach in that situation is never going to be like, well, and this player, yeah, they do this well. They're probably not going to make the team, but I have to say something nice about them. But I just think in coaches in all sports, you can kind of know when it's just performative. But she seemed really, really engaged and excited about everything these players were bringing to the table. And on draft night, I was like, okay, I know Maïa Hirsch isn't going to be coming over this year, but there's no way 4 rookies make the team, do they? And then after yesterday, I'm like, there's a chance 4 rookies make the team. Cheryl said several times that this is about making this training camp as competitive as possible. And if all 4 of these rookies rise to the occasion and are competing harder than some of the veterans and some of the free agents that came in, like they all have a decent chance. And I think the sort of the heartbreaking thing when you do get a player like Brea Beal where you do is it's just like there's only so many roster spots to go around, and it's just the emblem of why we need more teams in this league is so that we're not wondering if Brea Beal is going to make a team out of training camp. But when Cheryl got to Brea, she said, anyone who watched us defensively last year knows we need Brea Beal. And Brea, laughed. The whole room laughed. But I think that was a moment that for sure stood out. And I think I was convinced. I left there convinced that all 4 of them. Yeah, I don't know what the likelihood is, but that there's a real chance that all 4 of them are on this team when the season starts on May 19th.
Yeah, I think so. Now that you mention that, it's interesting because I'm looking at the Lynx salary cap sheet from her hoop stats, and I'm trying to sort of think, okay, who is on the hot seat? Is it really possible that all 4 rookies make this team? I mean, when you think about recent rebuilds in recent WNBA history, as you all know, I cover the New York Liberty, and I saw that play out in the Wubble, where the idea was we're going to have 7 rookies on roster, and we're going to really see who is ready to rock with us. The Indiana Fever did the same thing where they had, oh my God, I think they had 5 rookies on roster. And so we're really seeing, and the Dallas Wings, of course, I think, I don't remember the number, but as we know, the Dallas Wings are known to aggregate picks in a pretty dramatic way. So I'm really curious, sort of just looking at who they have. Is it possible that those 4, because Maïa Hirsch she's more of a draft and stash type, is it possible? I wonder. I mean, I'm not going to say any of them. I mean, for Diamond Miller, I think she is going to be a cornerstone on this team. And I think you would agree.
Right.
But when it comes to, I mean, I think Cheryl said that Dorka is going to have to fight for her spot on this roster. But if you look at what they need, we don't know when Natalie Achonwa is coming back.
Right.
And I think what Cheryl liked most about Natalie Achonwa when she signed her all of those years ago, although we don't have to get into that contract, but she really liked how she passes, especially in the high post, and just that facilitation. And that to me is something that can really translate when it comes to Dorka Juhász. When it comes to Brea Beal, I think the Lynx need to get better defensively. So there's a case for Brea Beal there. I mean, weren't they one of the worst defensive teams in 2022?
Yes. Yes, it's in a word, yes.
And I think we know that Cheryl does not like that.
Right.
She hates not being solid defensively.
Mhm.
I think that's a part of the Lynx lore, being solid defensively and valuing the defensive side of the ball. So, and then with Taylor Soule, it's about getting more athletic. So I see a path. I see a path for all of them. And I'm looking here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 players that are on training camp deals. So that creates, I think, a little bit more flexibility for them to sort of be like, okay, we're going to watch them and really see what happens.
Right.
So anyway, what I wanted to ask you next about when it comes to moments during this press conference was something that Brea Beal said. And I asked her a question about I asked all of them a question about what it was like to experience the pomp and circumstance of the day. And what Brea Beal had to say was really interesting. I have the quote here, which I can read to everyone quickly. And then, Terry, I'd love for you to sort of like react to sort of what that moment was like and what that moment means. So, Brea Beal said, "When we were touring around the city and around the facilities, I thought a lot about the stigma around women's basketball, the WNBA specifically. Just being welcomed by the amazing staff and, them seeing us at the airport. Little things like that. It makes me feel loved, makes me feel cared for. The different staff that are going to take care of our bodies and the different food that we have. So it just made me think a lot about the stigma, the negative stigma around it, and just how positive this place is and how excited it makes you. And that's what I thought about when I was here." Wow. What does that moment, I think, encapsulate for you there?
I think it encapsulates the type of culture the Lynx have worked so hard to put in place, certainly over the last decade and a half or so, and just know that they had the chance to get great players and they capitalized it, but they've also really invested off the court in the staff. I think that it really is an organization that preaches excellence in every department. I've worked with their media staff, and I know some of their ticketing folks really well. Some of them were there yesterday and were just hanging with season ticket holders who have been around for 15 years, and it's just very, very personable. So I don't think there's any gesture that's too small. And I feel like the phrase "if you build it, they will come" has been just sort of overused in every element of the sports industry. But when Kathy said it on draft night, I do think it really applies. Where some people are sitting here being like, "Oh my God, 10 million people watched the Division I women's championship, and more than 10 million people watched the WNBA draft," and it's just like, Yeah, of course they did. Like, that market has always existed. There's always been people who cared, and just once you give them the opportunity to even experience the product and put resources into it, I think, like the deal recently with charter flights being expanded, um, is another thing that I don't think is quite enough, but is more baby steps in the right direction, which is not nothing. So I think it just spoke to all of that. That yeah, this is a big deal. These players being drafted, and here's an organization in a city that's treating it like a big deal. When I think everyone in this league and all of these players have had to handle a lot more mental fortitude just by simply existing. You're with by having any social media account, that trolls attack you every day in a way that I can't relate to. I can't imagine what it's like, especially being a young person in this country. So I think, them just going around the city, there's a sort of like famous like art house theater that's hosting yesterday was the first day of the Twin Cities International Film Festival, and the marquee had welcomes for all of the players, and they took photos outside of it. That's not something that's going to necessarily result in the Lynx hanging a banner this year, but you're making players feel seen and feel loved and feel like playing in the WNBA is a special thing, because it is a special thing. And I think just the more organizations that do those small things to really celebrate how special it is, keeps moving the league forward. And I think a lot of people have been doing it in the shadows for a long time. I can pretty much only speak to the Lynx side of things there, but I think that's yesterday and Brea noticing that and really using the platform she had yesterday to speak to it is, that's years of work bearing fruit, and a lot of people who have cared for a long time for this organization. And it shows that I think you invest. It's argued at the Lynx all the time, just invest in women's sports and give people the opportunity. And that's, why working with the Next is so great and so fun. But yeah, I think it really just encapsulates like that type of work that the Lynx have invested in, and the results speak for themselves. So I think it's just, I don't want to keep repeating, if you build it, they will come, but that is essentially the spirit of what I think Brea was getting at yesterday.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, so first of all, I loved the fact that they were welcomed on the film festival
Right.
marquee.
Like,
That
that's
was
so cool.
that was amazing. That
Yeah.
was amazing. Like, I mean, ugh, I when you think about pop culture references, I mean, this is another reason why I'm very disappointed that their black and white Prince inspired uniform won't be the uniform
I
anymore,
know.
right?
Yeah.
God, it's like if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Right.
That was a beautiful uniform.
Mhm.
Beautiful. But anyway, going on a bit of uh, a pop culture digression here, but
I'm
I
here for
think
that.
yes, yes. But just to see the Lynx organization embrace that, I think is huge. And I was just sort of thinking, you know, the pomp and circumstance that the organization made the draftees feel, to be quite honest, it felt very similar to how a team would flex during free agency. And sort of
Mhm.
like, I was there when the Liberty introduced Jonquel Jones. I was there when the Liberty introduced Brianna Stewart and Courtney Vandersloot. And so, I felt a lot of those same vibes
Mhm.
while I was on Zoom, while I was looking at all of the social media posts, the fact that the players went into the locker room and there were their jerseys sitting there waiting for them. Those are really special moments that really matter.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but and I think we'll discuss this in the next segment a little bit more, but it just seemed to me like the Lynx were sort of reestablishing themselves and reminding people, "Hey, we're one of the most forward-thinking organizations in this league." You know, although we're in sort of this rebuilding period, we deserve to be spoken about in the same conversation as the Liberty, the Aces, and the Dream when it comes to investing in the players and when it comes to making that player experience what it should be. That's sort of what that statement said to me. And I think before we move on, I think the stigma that Brea Beal was really going at was this discussion that was online. It was almost like a discussion between Lynn Dunn, the GM of the Indiana Fever, and college players like Tamari Key, and then I think Coach Yo was chiming in. I think that was sort of what Brea Beal was talking about when she said the stigma. Because I think it was Tamari Key who was like, "Yep, the real big reason is the charter flights, and in college we have all of these things, and in the W, not so much." And it's really interesting to just sort of see a player who's obviously very much so a digital native. I mean, Brea Beal is very active on social media. To sort of see her take in that online discourse, and then for her to be like, "Oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe that discourse is flawed."
Right. And it's hard to really understand that if you don't have like your boots on the ground somewhere. Like I think I can't speak to what it's like going from being a college basketball player to a professional basketball player. So I do think when like the there's been a lot of embarrassing moments regarding travel and air travel specifically in the W over the years, and I think it's important for those stories to get out just so that the league does something about them. But also it's easy for those stories to you just keep circulating and circulating, and then what the truth of the experience of being a player in the W can get a little bit lost in translation, I feel like. So I think it's for players to get to the league and have those experiences. Where I was just thinking when you mentioned the introductory presser of Jonquel Jones and Vanderstu in New York, that it didn't seem that much different. And I do think there's a line you have to toe there, like where you can't be like here's Diamond Miller who is going to be an MVP like Jonquel. Like that wouldn't be responsible. But also you can have an experience for a young player coming in and be organically excited and be like, this is good. We're going to do what we can to make this a day you will always remember. And that goes for Diamond and the rest of the players in the draft class, and being like, doesn't matter if you're 2 or 28. And I think we may have lost Maïa Hirsch on Zoom at one point. She was on a screen and then wasn't there. You were in the Zoom room. Maybe you could speak to. I think they did what they could to try and include Maïa as much as they could in the festivities. But people notice effort like that. So I think the more the W keeps doing that for players at every franchise, make everyone just love being in this league and love being a part of its growth is going to keep going a long way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a discussion about, I guess, ownership schisms. I was alluding to this before, how the Lynx are sort of in this tier of ownership groups that are like, we really care, we have the money, let's go.
Right.
And so while, this obviously, I think, was a really successful day for the Lynx and really for the league, we can't shy away for the fact that some of the ownership schisms are why, charter flights aren't where they should be right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to, make sure that we know that too, or remember that.
Right.
So let's briefly take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about sort of what this means for Lynx history, which we sort of started touching on. But first, I would like to talk to y'all about a thing that helps me make sure that I don't get hangry, and that's Built Bar. So I'm very much someone who, like, food is fuel, food is sacred, Food it helps me with my mood. That's just sort of who I am. And, when you're covering women's basketball, there are some pretty chaotic times. You're sort of on the go. You're who knows, there could be like a double overtime and you get hungry. Who knows? And so if you're like me, who gets a little hangry, I've got the thing for you, and it's Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and they taste really good. I mean, seriously, they taste so good you won't think that they're necessarily healthy for you. So, what contributes to Built Bar's brilliant taste? Well, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and they come in delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. To be quite honest, I'm not really sure how Built does it. I mean, these bars, they taste like candy while also maintaining amazing macros. They're only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now, you don't need to wait to get a box. I mean, for years, we've been talking about how you have to order Built Bars on Built.com, but now you can get Built Bars or Built Puffs at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, where you can get your specialty flavors. But that's right, you can head to your nearest Walmart today and walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box in bulk. Oh yes, 13 bars with our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later, and you can also tell them that Grandma Myrna sent you. So if you listen to this podcast regularly, you will know what that inside joke means. Yes, Grandma Myrna sent you. Okay, so segment 3. What does this moment mean for Lynx history? I think where I want to start, Terry, is if you could trace sort of the mood for me of what it's been like for the Lynx organization and the Lynx fans. So if you could start in January and then move through up to now, I think that's really important context.
Right. Well, I think January, I think my first official day on the beat was I woke up and the first thing on my phone was Maïa Moore is officially retiring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most Lynx fans, and just in my opinion, I didn't have the belief that Maïa was going to come back and play. But it's still something, that shifts your mentality when Maïa says, I'm officially retiring. So I think there is a sort of mood, a little bit of gratefulness among Lynx fans for everything Maïa did for this team, everything she's doing for the world. And then maybe even a little bit of just a relief, like knowing, okay, Maïa Moore is not going to to play for the Lynx anymore. And it's going to be a new era. And that's, always a tough sort of thing to do internally, externally. And then also, since you said goodbye to Sil as a fan, like 3 months before that. And then just on like free agency is going to start. And it's like the Lynx might sign Courtney Vandersloot. The Lynx might sign Brianna Stewart. And Nafisa's going with Cheryl to Turkey to recruit players. And there could be just like, oh, yeah, you thought we were rebuilding. That's cute. We're reloading and trying to hang another banner. So when that didn't happen, and very little happened, there wasn't a lot for me to do for a long time. I think I was sending Slack messages like, can I like make myself useful over here in Minnesota, helping anybody with stuff. And I think it was there was a stretch where like the fans were like, okay, who is gonna be on this team? There's Fee, and I think Jessica Shepard was under contract, and Powers and McBride, and those were the 4 players who were on the Lynx website for probably over a month. And when free agency is happening and you're seeing players go elsewhere, and Brianna Stewart's tweeting 15 different emojis at a time and trying to figure out what that means. I think there was a boat in one of them, and someone texted it to me and was just like, does this mean Brianna's talking about lakes and she wants to come play in a place where I was like, probably not. Keep that creative thinking going. Hang on to that hope until it's completely gone. But I don't, unless Elon made it, the 10,000 characters and she can tweet 10,000 lake emojis. I don't think she's coming to Minnesota. So yeah, I think rightfully fans were either sad about officially saying goodbye to the only era of Lynx basketball a lot of them have known. Like, if I think Gen Z fans probably don't remember much of the pre-Simone era and the pre-Cheryl era. So that it's like, okay, what is this team I love now? And everyone loves Fee and everyone loves Cheryl. So I think it's there's always been a lot of reasons to be bullish that something's coming, but as players kept signing elsewhere and they missed out on Stewart and Vandersloot and Ezra Stevens as well, it was like, okay, every other team is getting better and we're kind of just sitting here. And I do think that flipped with the roster, just with filling out, bringing back players like Lindsay Allen and Rachel Banham, which were widely rumored for a long time, so it didn't surprise too many people. Bridget Carleton's been a fan favorite here for a while, so her being back in the fold. So it filled out just kind of like, okay, like nothing to go crazy over, but I think this is fine. And then I think just sort of optimism continued to grow towards the draft. And I think they nailed all 5 picks. And I think fans are at a point now where like, this is just going to be a fun team to watch build. This is what same, different team, same organization. But when the Timberwolves traded Garnett back in 2007, I think this is what they wanted fans to do. Be like, we're going to build something now. We're going to pivot from what we were. And that obviously wasn't a team coming off championships or anything close. And then, of course, that pivot ended up being the worst decision they could have possibly made. But I think like the logic is kind of like of being like, oh, like this is sort of a new project and we get to put our stamp on it a little bit. And I keep going back to last Friday where Cheryl was pretty chipper with us when longtime great local sports writer Kent Youngblood asked her about just the excitement of this new challenge, as opposed to, and then Cheryl kind of finished his sentence for him as opposed to having dynasty teams, but smiled and laughed. And I think this opens up things for her coaching wise a little bit, where I think they'll play a little bit differently. I think they might run a bit more than they have in the past, and they have been a fast paced team and just relentless defensive team that I think changed a little bit recently. But I think the fans are in a good spot now. I hesitate to overstate that, but I think the fans are in a comfortable place where they want to see good basketball, and good basketball for this team this year may not necessarily translate to I don't know what the over under will end up being, but winning a bunch of games, because I think growth is much more important this year than results. And I just think some of these young players are going to be really fun to watch, and it's probably liberating to not have to worry about the win-loss column as much in previous years. I think this fan base also really trusts Cheryl for a lot of great reasons. And after the draft, I think I'm just going to pull up this quote here from her, where she said, "Unlike in some years past, we're incredibly open-minded in terms of who is on this roster and why. And I think all these prospects should feel really good about coming to Minnesota Lynx training camp, because they'll be given an absolute very good look and a chance to be on our team." And I think the fans echo that and know that they're being given that chance to build something that could bear fruit 5 to 10 years down the road, and not necessarily in the 2023 playoffs. I wouldn't put anything past Cheryl. So I'm not predicting Cheryl that the Lynx won't make the playoffs this year, formally. But I think the fans are excited, and it can go when you take this step into a new era. Like there's every possibility is in the fold, and that's kind of an exciting place to be. So I think the fans are excited.
Yeah, I mean, Terry, that was a wonderful, wonderful recap of the emotions. I mean,
Mhm.
it's been a roller coaster, I'm sure, for not just Lynx fans, but for the people inside. I mean, I
Right.
think there probably had to be a moment of grief, not just for the fans, but also for everyone in the Lynx organization. I mean, I remember I was a longtime listener of the Cheryl Reeves show. I thought it was an
Mhm.
excellent podcast because not only did it talk about the Lynx, but it spoke about the WNBA writ large. And Cheryl was really open into some of what goes on being an executive in the league. And so when that show ended, it sort of ended during that time, right after the Lynx didn't get who they wanted in free agency. I was like, oh my God, like what is going on in Minnesota? Like that
Right.
this is very sad. But to sort of see them emerge from the ashes like this is really refreshing. I think that's the way I'd put it. And I think it there's a very stark difference from how the Lynx have done this versus some other teams this offseason. Um, you know, the Chicago Sky created this very, I don't know, like a stigma. We'll use the word stigma again. They created a stigma against the term rebuild. And I think the Storm have just sort of been a little bit quiet. The Storm sort of are just like
Mhm.
throwing players against the wall and they're going to see what sticks. But I guess, you know, what I guess did you think of the fact that the Lynx are sort of like, yeah, we're embracing this.
I think it's I think it feels refreshing for them, and I think in comparison to what Seattle's doing, Seattle still has a phenomenal player in Joel Lloyd, and
Mhm.
could very well be a factor. And I think having a player like Fee, but for Cheryl and the whole team, does provide some comfort, and going through everything that, like, how hard of a season last year was, and not having Fee available. And Fee's been very open about, she was gunning for a return last year for Sylvia, and to
Mm,
play with still, and to give her everything she had. It wasn't let's try and save the season and make a run type of decision for her. So I think it'll be, we'll see all-star level Fee pretty early in the season. I think she had a great USA basketball camp in February, and is ready to get in here with these new players, and some of the vets, as well. So I think Fee really sort of makes it be like, I don't think they've said the word rebuilding.
oh,
I'd have to go back. I don't know if they've been, if Cheryl said that out loud. I have to go back and look at the transcripts for sure. But I know
whoops.
she has said, like, she has said long view. I know that for sure.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that you can do both, that you can, play for the short term, and while building for the long term. And I think the organization has, given her that blessing to go forward and try to, maybe we can. I don't know if she said this either, but I think revamp is fair. Like, try and build another dynasty with a revamped roster.
Right.
Dynasties are hard to build, so that's a pretty high star to be reaching for. But I think I don't know. Would it be that shocking if the Lynx were a playoff team this year? Like, I don't think it would necessarily be if Fee leveled up from an all-star level, that she was prior to missing last season, and if they fell pretty far from the playoffs, I don't think that would be so surprising either. So I think it's a comfortable place to be in. Uh, I think from a coach's standpoint, being a motivator, like, I feel like every single coach talks about the doubters and the haters and the media critics, and
Mhm.
like, who is like saying this stuff about like UConn the last, up until this season, what doubters exist. But I think there are some doubters, and for sure that you have some talented pieces. I'm now forgetting what your question was, but I do, I do think there's a lot of uh, room and good authentic reasons for excitement. And I do think Cheryl has spoken a few times about the fact that she does have an executive hat on and a head coaching hat on, and I think you can masterfully put those two things together. And I don't know who else in this business, if I'm Glenn Taylor, I'd want in that position for the Lynx for a project like this.
No, for sure. I mean, there was a point where I was a little worried. I was like, "Oh no, are the Lynx going to do what the Sky did?" Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I'm a little nervous here.
yeah.
Um,
I was nervous when she ended the podcast too. Like, I didn't say anything, but I was like, just
well,
timing.
yeah, the timing definitely felt a little somber, but I think it makes sense in a general scheme of things. It's sort of like a new era in Lynx basketball requires a different level of attention.
Yeah.
And I think, I've been someone who has spoken quite a lot this offseason about front office expansion. And to promote Claire DeWellius to general manager was a
Mhm.
huge move. The fact that the Lynx added I believe, a data
Yeah.
scientist in the fall, a huge move. So there is no doubt that the Lynx are going to they're going to work as hard as they can throughout this new era, to build it back up. And so I think the last question I have for you, Terry, before we sign off is something I wanted to ask Diamond and all the players yesterday during the press conference, but didn't have the chance, was just this idea of, is this group ready, or is someone like Diamond Miller ready to uphold the rich history of the Lynx? Is she someone who is going to really grab fans' attention?
Yeah, I think that is a tall order for
Mhm.
any rookie. But I do think that's something that does put the Lynx in a favorable position. I think every one of the players yesterday mentioned the history of the organization and did so in a way that it didn't feel rehearsed. Like they got in and like maybe an hour or two before, there's a PR team going like, go through these talking points. I think there's definitely brand value there, and the Lynx aren't so far removed from that legacy. It's been a few years since hoisting the trophy, but as Cheryl reminded us on Friday, after a lot of, I think, we'll say the doubters and the haters thought the Lynx were done after 2018, and they were a playoff team and in the thick of it in 19, 20, and 21 as well. So I think these young players who have been following the league for a while, and Taylor Soule, who has connections to Minnesota and spoke yesterday
Mhm.
about how spending a lot of summers of her childhood up here, I think there's a genuine appreciation for that. Will that manifest in a way with the fans? I hope so, because I think that'd be really fun to cover. I think Diamond will play in a way that absolutely does do that with the fans. I think patience needs to be preached for for everyone, probably Cheryl included. And I think Diamond will be a really exciting player and plays her ass off, for sure. Like there's no doubt about that. So I think I'm really excited just from a basketball standpoint, just to see the possibility of Diamond and Fee playing together. So I think she does have that potential, and she spoke about it on draft night and in her media availability since that. I think she has a lot of respect for those players and that history, but is, gonna not try and step into their shoes and still wants to be Diamond Miller and write her own story for this franchise. And I think there is a chance things go well, and 10 years from now, we're looking at her 10-year career with the Lynx. There's obviously a lot to play out until that day. But I do think that chance is there. And I'm on the more optimistic side of it working out to a degree. But I mean, yeah, it's a big shadow of history to play in. And I think we'll find out in the next, few years, if that is a helpful motivator for Diamond, and also this crop of players that are taking this next step in Minnesota Lynx history.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I remember, in addition to Taylor Soule, I think it was something like Dorka Juhász was like, "Oh yeah, Paige," as in Paige Becker,
Right.
texted me and was like, "Oh, you're drafted to my home city, my hometown. Oh my gosh!" And so, feeling that love, I'm sure Paige will get a group of UConn folks,
Mhm.
in to watch her, or maybe when the Lynx come to Connecticut or
Yep.
even to New York. So that should be exciting. Well, thank you to all the listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And I want to give a huge thank you to Terry for joining the show and providing fascinating analysis on what's been a fascinating week for the Minnesota Lynx. Please follow him at Terry Horstman. You see that on Twitter. And remember to join us tomorrow for an episode of the show where Hunter Cruse and Adler will dive into the post-mortem of the 2023 WNBA Draft. I'm Jackie Powell alongside Terry Horstman, and we wish you a happy Friday and a restful weekend.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.